On this episode discusses sensitive topics, including occupational health risks, behavioral health, and suicide awareness. Some content may be difficult for certain listeners. We encourage you to listen with care and reach out for support if needed. Hello and welcome to the Clear Voice Podcast, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. Today we'll be talking with public safety experts about health and wellness. With me today is the president of Clear Career Professionals, Michael Bays. How's it going, Michael?
Doing great, James, and excited to be here. This is a really important topic when we're talking about employee health and wellness and all the things that are going on in the workplace, and making sure that we're, looking at our folks and making sure we're doing as much as possible to improve their lives and eventually just improve their performance and hopefully impact communities.
Yeah, definitely. It's a topic that has gained steam over the time that I've been in public safety. And of course, it is applicable not just to public safety, but all employees. You get better performance when they feel healthy and well. Do you want to introduce our special guest for today?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really honored here at Clear Career Professionals to have an amazing team of folks that work together, improving cities in a number of different ways. Today, we have two of our vice presidents, and both of them have long and distinguished careers, particularly in public safety, but their scope goes well beyond that. First and foremost, Danny Kistner has been with us almost since we started, a long career in the fire service, and just an amazing leader and gentleman, and so happy to have him on. And then Jeff Spivey came onto our team last year, and we, again, are so honored to have him come onto our organization and be able to continue to impact communities. And Jeff has just a very distinguished career in law enforcement, and I'll sort of let them talk more about their journey. At the Texas City Manager Conference this last year, there were several city managers who were talking about overall mental health and wellness as well. And so I know this topic is fresh on everyone's minds, and we're all being impacted. But Danny, can you talk a little bit about your experience and kind of introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Danny Kistner. I spent a career in the fire service, spent 40 years, the last 14 as the fire chief. And for the last 20 years or so, I've had this passion for health and wellness. If you think about it, what is more important than protecting life and protecting the life of the community we serve, protecting the life of our employees? I can't think of a greater responsibility of every leader than the protection of human life.
All right, Jeff. And if you can kind of tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Jeff Spivey, I was the chief of police in Irving, Texas until January of 2022. My career started in Irving in 1986, and I grew up through the organization, rising through the ranks to chief of police. In that 35 years, I saw that policing specifically and public service in general evolved over that time period from not valuing and not putting a lot of resources and attention to employee health and wellness to it becoming a priority. And I agree with Danny in that I think leadership's number one priority should be the health and wellness of their employees. If as leaders we're taking care of our people will do the job that we've hired them to do. And certainly in the police and fire service, we're finding that it's easier to take care of the people we have and keep them engaged and keep them well and keep them healthy throughout their career and to retirement than it is to replace them, try to recruit new employees. The ability to find men and women who are willing to do the jobs in public services is getting more and more difficult as the technology changes around what work looks like. As more and more people want to go virtual, public service, whether you're in the police or fire industry, when you're in public works, parks and rec, city management, you need to be in person. It's all about people. And so having a healthy workforce ensures that our communities are able to deliver the services that we expect of them.
Good deal. Well, and coming from the police world, Jeff, when we look at 21st century policing, health and wellness is one of the pillars of that report, and certainly has been identified as something that's important for a number of years. Unfortunately, I think even though that it's been a topic of conversation and there's been action taken on it, I think there's a lot of room to grow in that area. As much as leaders know about it, maybe they're not pursuing it or kind of pushing it maybe like they should be. And Danny, I know your work extends well beyond your retirement as a fire chief, and you're still very active in this area. I know with the Fallen Firefighters Association and a number of things that you're doing. I've heard you speak on the leader's responsibility as well, and just wanted to see if you could touch on that.
Michael, as you mentioned, I am the Director of Fire Service Programs for the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And the NFFF really has a threefold mission. One is to recognize America's fallen firefighters. The second is to provide support for their families and help the organization recover. And the third, that's pretty much where I come in, is the work to reduce preventable line of duty death and injury. I mentioned kind of at the opening remarks that I can think of no greater responsibility than the protection of human life. That's a role that I take very seriously. I had a communication with Kathy Hedrick. I had a son who was a volunteer firefighter, and he was killed in the line of duty, successfully rescued somebody out of a structure fire, and was going back in to search for another victim when he was caught up in a wind-driven fire and killed. And my conversation with Kathy, she had stated something that really stuck with me, and that was leadership failed my son. Now, I did not take that as a condemnation of the incident commander or the incident command team at that structure fire. What I took that was a personal charge that it is the leader's responsibility to do everything in our power to prevent line of duty death. As a matter of fact, my mantra as a fire chief, really as a career firefighter, has been, I could not live with the burden if somebody died because of something I didn't know, but I should have known. And I could not live with the burden that somebody died because of something I didn't do, but I should have done. I've taken that as a charge to educate myself on the nuances of every aspect of leadership, especially as it pertains to health and wellness and best practice, and try to incorporate that into my leadership regimen. And I try to share that with as many people as I can. And the boundaries go beyond public safety. As you mentioned, that the boundaries go into just every environment you can think of. I like to share the lessons learned in the course of my career. I find it challenging to overcome the human factors that are natural barriers or resistors to best practice and healthier lifestyles and that kind of thing. It's a great challenge to try to overcome those human factors. But every opportunity I have, I try to get out there in front of people and share this information.
Yeah, that's a great response, Danny. And I think it's Simon Sinek who talked about your job as a leader isn't to be in charge, it's to take care of those people in your charge. Having that message out there is really, really important. Jeff, I think that's something that you've really worked on. And can you talk a little bit about what you've done since you left policing that's been impacting this area, like Danny had talked about doing the Fallen Firefighters Association, a number of things. I know you've been doing some similar type work.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I retired, I was asked in conjunction with my retirement to chair the Officer Safety and Organizational Wellness section for the International Association of Chiefs of Police. It was a brand new section that they were standing up. I had the honor to step into that role and begin from an international perspective, looking at how we improve the health and safety of all employees within the police service, not just police officers, but dispatchers, corrections, records, crime scene, anyone who has the authority and ability and responsibility to serve within the police service. We look at how best to keep them healthy and well as individuals, and then ultimately as the organization. We want to provide the organization with the opportunity to provide resources to connect their employees with services, to support their employees in ways that traditionally we haven't considered. And so for the last 3 years, I've been serving in that role, working with professionals from all over the world and across the different disciplines to really fine-tune policies, procedures, best practices, and bring information to individual employees and organizations on how best to stand up wellness programs, how best to serve the population that's out doing that job. Not only did my work with IFCP allow me to continue to serve and give back, but I was also fortunate enough when I retired, started work with the Caruth Police Institute and the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, and was honored to help stand up the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network that was established in 2021 in the 87th legislative session in Texas, a state-funded, state-supported peer network for police officers across the entire state of Texas, working with professionals in the mental health world, in the law enforcement world, and with our legislatures. And with TCOL, we were able to establish a program where any police officer in the state of Texas has access to a peer to get that support that they need. And we think about from the large agency perspective, the Dallases, the Irvings, the Planos of the world, we have resources that we can bring to bear to address problems within our workforce. I think it's 90-something% of all agencies in the state of Texas and probably across the United States have fewer than 25. And so they don't have the resources necessary to provide that level of service, to have peers step in when you're struggling. And so having a statewide network gives that access to those employees who need it.
Yeah, that's great work. I know that you guys are familiar with Marcel Burnell and his work in the area, and I'm excited to see his new book that just got released, Dignity and Leadership, and he's very passionate about this subject as well. Matter of fact, James, I think he'll be coming on the program with his co-author here in a couple of weeks. But, I had the chance to be in conversation with Marcel talking about some of the mental health things that are going on in the state, and definitely the peer-to-peer network is extremely important because, something that we kind of see is leadership sometimes creates health and wellness as a checklist. They may have a program or an EAP or something like that. If somebody comes to them with, hey, what are you doing about health and wellness? So they go, well, we do that. And I think the important thing in conversation with Marcel that came up was it's so much more than just saying you do it. It's not a program, it's a value. I think we all know the dangers of physical wellness, like, hey, it's important to eat right, work out, kind of stay in physical condition, no matter what level you're serving at in an organization. But I think for a long time, the stigma's been there on mental health. We just kind of pass it off as a checklist item. And so what I told Marcel is I'd really love to see agencies start coming in and making mental health a core value to make sure that, from the time somebody applies for a position with the organization or the city, that we're talking about mental health, that we're talking about how do we support each other, and then also letting our elected officials know about that. It's one thing to run through the organization up to the city manager level, but also how do we really communicate that importance to the elected officials? They're seeing budgetary expenditures going a certain direction, and they're like, hey, what is all this about? Danny, can you kind of speak to that a little bit? How can we impact that to making it more something that's intrinsic as opposed to a program that we're just putting out there?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, Michael. I think there's still a stigma out there on mental behavioral health. And I think there's a lot of people that don't talk about it, don't seek help because of that stigma. There's still a fear that if I do talk about it or if I show weakness, that I'm having a problem, that my job will be in jeopardy or somebody will look down on me. I'll be taken out of a leadership position. So I think there is still that challenge that needs to be overcome. I think we've made some great progress as far as trying to get the word out. I think that still exists. And I think that in a lot of circumstances, the leadership still kind of personifies that. I don't think we have reached that point where leadership across the board is accepting that this is a real issue that needs to be dealt with. I think we're making progress, but I just don't think we're there yet. As far as educating state, local leaders, legislators, et cetera, one thing we're doing with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation is we'll be launching a study very soon to create a program that does just that educates state, local leaders on issues such as mental health and wellness, in this case, dealing with firefighters. I think the application, again, crosses all boundaries. Until we can eliminate that stigma, it's going to be an issue. The fire service last several years, best we can tell with the data we've accumulated, that more firefighters are dying from their own hand than actual line of duty death. Occupational cancer, of course, surpasses that. We just haven't figured out a way to collect the data conclusively. A lot of different reasons for that. There's still some more work to be done, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and thanks for that contribution, Danny. And I want to circle back around to the occupational cancer exposure and prevention in just a minute. But before I do that, Jeff, I think something that Danny and I have talked about before is as technology is coming into the workplace, more and more what we see is departments, whether that's police or fire, losing that interpersonal connection between the team members themselves. I was teaching a class a couple of years ago and working with some law enforcement executives, and a number of people in the room don't either do briefings or debriefings. Officers will check in on their computer and begin working, and then they'll check out on their computer and go home. Then there's those same agencies may prohibit officers from parking car to car or gathering together. And then what happens, I think, in those environments is you never get a chance to talk to your fellow peers or kind of download after a call that you go to, or even just kind of learn what should I do on these calls in order to best respond. How important is it that we, as leaders, specifically in law enforcement, but also throughout municipalities and government, that we allow our employees to have those interpersonal connections with each other in order to just alleviate some of the stress and then be there for each other in those hard times?
Yeah, no, I think that's key. I think that shared experience carries a lot of weight as you respond to those calls and experience things that, the human being shouldn't have to experience, especially multiple times during a career. Having the opportunity to speak with someone who's walked that walk, who's been in those shoes, who understands where you're coming from is incredibly important. I think back on my time as chief of police, and I was fortunate that I had an organization that we had a good culture that supported each other, took value in mental health. But I remember having a police officer come to me one time, and he had taken advantage of the city's EAP program. And in that program, he was referred to a psychologist who wasn't used to working with police officers. And so as he's talking to the psychologist, he begins to share with the psychologist a very difficult case he was working involving a child. And the psychologist, as he's sharing this, began to cry because of the trauma that he had experienced. And, he came to me and said, "Chief, I spent the next hour of my time consoling the person who was supposed to be helping me." So it's important for leadership not only to allow that interaction to happen organically within the culture, but to also be really intentional in identifying resources that are culturally competent, that can provide a level of help to the unique perspectives of police officers and police employees. Because just like the fire service, we see things that normal people don't understand, and having the opportunity to talk to someone who can relate to that is so very important to getting the help that you need.
Yeah. And Danny, can you speak to that a little bit as far as the fire service goes and kind of what those traditions or what those models look like?
Sure. I agree with Jeff. The peer-to-peer, the ability to communicate with each other that have experienced similar events, I think that is so important as far as the diffusing. And in the fire service, there's a lot of different traditions, but one that stands out in my mind is the kitchen table. And it seems like everywhere I go, in every department I've been with, that tradition holds true, that after a significant event, the best conversation, the best diffusing I ever had was just sitting around the kitchen table, just talking to other firefighters that were there. We get back from the event, we sit down at the kitchen table, and we just kind of rehash it, do a hot wash, whatever you want to call it. And that to me has been the greatest value for dealing with a particular scenario. And other organizations have similar sessions where they meet in a particular part of the fire station, or they congregate somewhere and they just talk.
Yeah, in my personal experience as a first line supervisor, it's such an enormous opportunity to help guide those conversations in the policing world, maybe at a debriefing or at the end of the shift, kind of helping guide those conversations and then letting your team kind of authentically mix those conversations together. And I think it creates a lot of credibility for the first line supervisor. It's important that you can kind of see where things are going, and naturally you have some responsibility that if things get off the rails and start going in a direction, you can kind of correct that type of discussion and lead them back down to, the core values of the agency and kind of where we serve from an internal perspective as a human. Not like you're watching them, but I'm just saying, like, being an active part of the conversation and really just building that credibility back and forth as a leader, I think is an extremely viable opportunity for a lot of folks. Danny, I want to come back to you real quick on the actual building of a building. And I know that you've been kind of at the front line of that and looking at what's important when we're looking at these facilities to make sure that we are having our eye on physical and mental wellness. To those people who are listening that are in municipal government, the way in which you create your structures can really impact your employees' health and wellness. And that can be in a fire station, a police department, or a city hall. And can you speak to that a little bit? And then Jeff, I'll loop you in after Danny talks.
Yeah, sure. That again is I don't want to say a complex subject, but it is, there's so much that can be incorporated into the design of a facility that actually encourages health and wellness. For example, it could be built in such a way that you make sure you maximize the opportunity for firefighters to bump into each other and just share stories or can sit and communicate. You don't want to create something that is just so isolated that they don't have opportunity to communicate. The other is lighting is important, and then natural lighting is important. Color is important. Getting input of those that are actually going to be in the building, by the building, getting input from them, that's important. The isolation of hazardous chemicals, the exhaust of hazardous fumes, and the fire service, and not just fire service, but fleet maintenance within cities, making sure that you have 100% source capture of vehicle emission exhaust evacuated to the outside. That is critical. Diesel exhaust has been linked with brain cancer. You want to make sure that that does not leach into a building as well. A lot of different things. And gaining in popularity in the last several years is the use of either steam showers or infrared saunas. It's still kind of controversial whether infrared saunas help eliminate heavy metals from the body after an exposure, but it is widely accepted of the mental health or the diffusing benefit of infrared sauna as far as that goes. So there is value there. So there's a lot of different things that could be incorporated into the design of a station, of a building, that should be incorporated across all levels and departments.
Jeff, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really changed within government service is the adoption of quiet rooms, the opportunity for employees to step away from the responsibilities for 15, 30 minutes to, be completely isolated, just to reset. And only have we seen that from a 911 telecommunicator standpoint, but in going back and forth to City Hall, I saw that so many times where, those customer service reps were constantly being challenged and berated by upset citizens about their water bill or about the sidewalk or the condition of the house next door. And those folks who are serving in that role are dealing with a lot of stress and have to keep that smile on their face and try to work through and problem solve. Our residents aren't always as understanding as we would like for them to be, and can be very demanding and sometimes just downright demeaning to that staff. And so the ability for them to step away from that window or step away from that call center and just kind of reset, just have some moments where they can just be quiet. We've seen that grow and gain popularity. And I think there's some real benefits into keeping our employees healthy and well from a mental standpoint. That should be something that every city considers, not just for the police department or the fire department, but across city government.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. There are companies out there and architectural firms that will consult with public safety officials and leaders and really get that hands-on perspective about, what should be included in a building. And I always applaud those cities who hire those firms and companies, because even though it may cost a few more dollars on the front end, the long-term payoff of productivity and just a more healthy culture, no matter what facility you're looking at, whether it's public works, police, fire, or city hall, really makes a difference. Kind of moving on to the next one, we've talked a little bit about physical fitness, but kind of even in the facility aspect of that, oftentimes the workout room or fitness area is an afterthought. They have a 20 by 20 closet that they didn't need space for, and so they'll throw a rowing machine and a little weight machine in there and say, hey, well, we've got a physical fitness room, and you can go in there and work in the dark. Most of the time, unless you're just extremely committed, the employees aren't using those things. When we speak about physical fitness, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of really getting that right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that leadership, as they're looking at this, not only should they be providing the facilities and the equipment necessary to stay healthy, they should be providing the time as well. If we're truly valuing the physical fitness of our employees, if we're truly concerned about their overall health from a heart standpoint, cardiovascular standpoint, a weight management standpoint, if we recognize how the physical fitness of an employee leads to better service, less illness, less injury, more time doing the job, then not only is it our responsibility to provide the equipment and the facility, it's our responsibility to provide the time. We just can't continue with the mindset of, well, if you want to stay physically fit, you'll find the time to do that. Our employees are pulled in so many different directions. They have other responsibilities outside of the 8, 10, 12 hours that they're spending serving our communities. They have families that they have to tend to. They have other responsibilities. So I think if we're going to say we value physical fitness, we need to provide them the opportunity to have that workout on duty and stay physically fit, because in the long run, it's going to benefit the organization as a whole.
Yeah, Danny, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I would agree 100%. Not only with the formal workout rooms and then providing time for employees to work out, but when we think about the workspace that we're at, instead of just having a sedentary, just a desk where you're just sitting all day long, the standing desks are gaining in popularity. There's small ellipticals or stair steps that are being incorporated with the standing desk, taking a break to walk around. It needs to be, for those that have a sedentary type job, that needs to be included, and opportunities presented, or fixes, I guess, if you will, for those employees as well. The fire service has long embraced the need for physical fitness, and I think that's reflected in a lot of the modern station constructions. And as a matter of fact, there was a Garland, Texas, the fire facility was built in such a way that city employees, all city departments could come and use that facility. But I think we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of those employees that have sedentary jobs and make arrangements for them to work out as well.
Something that I want to touch on kind of as we're getting close to wrapping up here is all of these things, when you're serving for the public, impacts those people who care and love you the most. Danny, how does health and wellness really relate to your family? When you're looking beyond that, how does it impact your team at the workplace and also just the community that we're serving?
It's such an interesting topic, Michael, and that is something that is typically not considered, generally speaking, especially among public safety, is that we tend to think of things in silos, and that I'm a firefighter, so therefore that's it. I'm all knowing on the fire service. But there's this other stakeholder group that we don't typically think of, and that is our family. I often tell a story of a particular structure fire where we were involved in a collapse, and we were pretty close to being hurt or worse. And at the time, I didn't give it a second thought. It was exciting, actually. And I thought I would go home and tell my wife about this, and that she would be just enamored with the story and is just as excited. And her words to me were, I don't want to raise our children alone. And that really got me thinking, okay, maybe the way I'm looking at this or approaching this is wrong. We need to remember this forgotten stakeholder group, that are families. And we need to provide for our own mental health, mental wellness, physical fitness, because what happens on the job, we can take it home, we take it out on our family, or we ignore our family. We try to deal with it without regard for the impact on them. It's very important that we include them in the conversations about when we talk about what is best for our own mental health and wellness, what is best for the organization, for the community. We need to bring these stakeholder groups into the conversation. And typically we exclude them because they're not subject matter experts in our particular field. And I think that is a barrier, that is a wall that we need to collapse.
Thank you for that, Danny, and I appreciate your thoughts on it. Jeff, can you address some of those topics?
Yeah, I think from the family perspective, including our family in our overall health journey is important. It's easy, as Danny was talking about, to silo out. Well, I have my work life and I have my family life. I think from a police perspective, there's this idea of I don't want to bring the job home and expose my family to the things that I've been exposed to. But many times they want to at least have some understanding of why you're in the mood that you're in, or why you're angry today, or why you're frustrated, or if you're introspective, why you're so quiet. You've been making hard decisions all day. You've been in control all day. The last thing you want to do is come home and have to continue that. You're just mentally exhausted. And helping the family understand that is truly important to ensuring that relationship remains strong. Many times what we saw in public service is what happened at home sometimes bled over into how you responded at work, and what happened at work sometimes bled over into how you treated your family at home. And, bringing the family in early. There's a lot of departments at the police side who have started family programming and, exposing to the family to, and basically training the family to, here's what to expect from your police officer when he or she comes home from work. Here's what they're going through. Here's how to help them. Here's how to support them. And I think when we include the entire family unit in that experience, we end up with a better employee, an employee who has the mental capacity and emotional stability to perform at a high level, both at work and at home.
Yeah, Danny, any additional thoughts on that?
Just we're talking about this, the forgotten stakeholder group. I just wanted to emphasize that sometimes we put our role ahead of our spouse, our significant other, our family. And we need to also remember that what's going on in their life is very important too. And sometimes we tend to think of what's happening to us as primary, and anything that happens with our spouse or our family is secondary. And we have to remember that it's not either or. It's a partnership. We're a team. We're part of a larger family. So what is happening in your spouse's life, your family's life, is just as important to them as what's happening in ours. And don't let that cloud any particular struggles or traumas that they may be going through to highlight our own. And I just wanted to kind of make sure that we remember that. The other element is sometimes we put our work family ahead of our legitimate family. And we need to remember who our legitimate family, who they are. So I just want to emphasize that point, that what's happening in our life is important, but what's happening in their life is equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there are some good resources out there. Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, Kevin Gilmartin's a good book. As we mentioned, Marcel Brunel and Dignity in Policing and now Dignity in Leadership are resources. Kind of to wrap it up is, what's a leader to do if we're looking at this? What's a good way to kind of set themselves up to begin doing some of the things that we're talking about? Jeff, can you just briefly speak about that, and then we'll give Danny a chance to also address that issue?
Yeah, I think one of the primary ways leadership should look at this issue is, what are other organizations doing? Let's learn from those who have been doing it or are doing it better than us. Let's look outside of the police service. Let's look at companies, organizations that aren't aligned with necessarily their mission as public service. How are corporations taking care of their employees? And let's engage our universities and colleges that are in and around us. What's the research show us? How best do we apply what other people have learned to our own organization? You have the access to a tremendous amount of data that's out there that can help you formulate a wellness program, whether it's starting really small or whether it's building on one that you've already established, not just being content with what you have, right? It's constantly looking to improve and innovate in the services and resources that you offer your employees.
Yeah, Danny, can you talk about the same topic?
Sure. And I would say that was very well said. I don't know that I could add any original content, but I will say that I think a leader needs to be a student of lifelong learning. As Jeff was saying, we don't have all the answers right now, and we don't know what we don't know. So you need to continuously seek out and learn, see what other people are doing. And don't forget to incorporate members of your team. I guarantee there's members of your team that have a particular interest in a certain element of this that are going to be subject matter experts. Be sure to utilize them. And then kind of a mantra I live by is never be satisfied with the status quo. There's always a better way to do something, and we just have to continuously seek that out.
Well, good deal, gentlemen. Well, I think it's such an important topic, and really appreciate being able to visit with both of you and all of your experiences and knowledge, and just helping those communities and leaders out there that are really trying to strive and do better. James, I want to pass it back to you as our host and make sure we wrapped up and covered everything we should have covered.
I'm taking in all the information from Danny and Jeff, and you yourself, Michael. It's very helpful. One of those things, reducing that stigma and making this important as part of the culture is a difficult topic, and trying to figure out how to do it. On the physical fitness side, it's modeling that behavior and talking about it. But on the mental health side, to make people understand that you really mean this, it's just difficult because some of those things are very private. So you can't use examples of how we helped this employee and how we, did this for this employee. Continuously making strides to show employees that those things are important without, obviously violating somebody's privacy is something that's going to continue being a challenge. Look forward to learning more things and keeping in tune with the latest and greatest advances and techniques so I can, better provide a good atmosphere for my employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to put a plug in. James, I know you'll be visiting with Marcel Burnell and his co-author Dan here, I think next week or two. I'm really looking forward to that program. And I'm sure we will branch off of this conversation more in-depthly into the research and work that they're doing. And just really appreciate both Danny and Jeff of being a part of our program. And thanks for being a part of CLEAR. I think our team is one of the best groups of government folks that can reach out and really impact communities throughout the nation. And you guys are both a huge part of that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Clear Voice podcast. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health challenges, please reach out to the resources available to you. For Texas police officers, the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network is available at 972-338-1314 or through their mobile app. Nationwide, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation and the First Responder Center offer dedicated resources for first responders. No matter your profession, confidential help is available 24/7 by calling 988 or visiting lifeline.org to connect with trained crisis counselors. Remember, you are not alone.